The Texas Rangers have signed Jacob deGrom to a 5-year deal worth $185 million. On this show, I'm breaking down why the money doesn't concern me, why the injuries don't concern me, and this is the best possible move the Rangers could have made this offseason. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers or find us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Jacob deGrom is a Texas Ranger for the next 5 seasons, possibly the next 6, depending on how some things shake out. It is a fantastic deal. He is the best pitcher on the market, and since he came up in 2014, he has been one of, if not, I'm going to say it, the best pitcher in baseball. And you should not care about his injury history. You should not care about the money. And the main reason you should not care about the money is because it's not your money. Say it with me. It's not your money. Unless you are part of the Rangers ownership group, it's not your money. Money isn't real. Look at inflation. Look at how expensive everything has gotten lately. A Jacob deGrom is bound to cost around $37 million average annual value, which is honestly less than I thought he'd get. Going 5 years, a little more than I thought he'd get. I thought 4 years would be able to get it done with over $40 million average annual value, but the Rangers went a little bit higher on the years, even gave him a mutual 6th year, and you should not be worried about the injuries because a lot of people are making them out to be a little bit bigger of a deal than they have been. A lot of people are using, especially the last 3 years specifically, as a reference point of, he didn't pitch more than 100 innings in the last 3 years. Yeah, well, in 2020, nobody pitched more than 100 innings. Barely anybody pitched over 80. He pitched 60, finished 3rd in the Cy Young voting in a full season of a shortened season. Remember that? Everybody remember that? Remember how that happened? Also, 2021, he was so gosh darn good in even less than 100 innings. He had a 1.08 ERA, finished top 10 in Cy Young voting despite missing almost the entirety of after the All-Star break. And this year when he came back, he was fantastic yet again, granted in a smaller sample size than 2021 or even 2020, but he was still his normal Jacob deGrom self. If you don't know who he is, welcome to baseball. This is the best pitcher in baseball. He is a 34-year-old going to turn 35 in June of next season. He has been with the Mets for his entire career. He has won 2 Cy Young Awards in 2018 and 2019, and had he not won those back-to-back years, I really think that he would have won the 2020 Cy Young Award, but voters were probably, there's a little bit of voter fatigue of, he had a fine season. It was a 2.38 ERA, led the league with 104 strikeouts and 68 innings, was just absolutely untouchable that year, as he had been the previous 2 years, and really for most of his career. He has been outright phenomenal. He throws 100 miles an hour, and it just sits at 100 miles an hour. As a 34-year-old, he's still got that elite level velocity on his fastball. He's a fastball and slider guy, also has a changeup and a curveball, but he uses all of them to get swings and misses at an ungodly rate. Absolutely ungodly. Things he does well is he pitches. You can't hit his pitches. You cannot make contact. He is striking out guys at an unreasonable rate, one of the best in all of baseball, and he also doesn't walk anybody either. Those are the two things that modern baseball seems to love, is not giving up home runs, which he does pretty well. 0.8 home runs per 9 innings through his career, 2.1 walks per 9, and nearly 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. He has just been absolutely phenomenal at limiting base runners, runs, hits, anything. He gives you nothing. Zero. Nada. Zilch. It is disgusting. Absolutely beautiful. If you want to look at something that should not be in reach of children because it is just too erotic. Just go look at the baseball savant page of Jacob deGrom and see how highly he ranks in basically everything. If you want guys who strike guys out, he does that well. If you want guys who can go deep into games, he does that pretty well when he's healthy. If you like guys who don't walk anybody, that's him. Don't give up home runs. Don't give up hard contact. Keep the ball in the ballpark. All of the things that you want pitchers to do well, he does all of that so well and has for his entire career. He has been so incredibly consistent. He has pitched over 140 innings every single season outside of the last three. There's only 1 year where he missed time, and that was before these last couple of years where he missed significant time. That was in 2016. Still had a really, really good year for, an average mortal pitcher, a 3.04 ERA in 24 starts, 148 innings and 143 strikeouts. The year before, he went 190 innings. And outside from 2015 to 2019, when he won his last Cy Young, every year but that 2016 year, he pitched at least 190 innings, including 3 straight years of 200 plus innings. And you may be thinking, oh, well, he's getting older. He's going to be, his age 35 season next year, and he's got to have a lot of, major league innings on his arm. Well, not really. He came up as a 26-year-old in 2014, pitched 140 innings that year, and, hasn't been completely overtaxed and overworked for the majority of his career. Granted, I don't think he's going to have many more, or maybe even any more 200 plus inning seasons. And you know what? That's okay. Next year, Fangraphs projects him to pitch 168 innings and have a 2.63 ERA and have a 5.5 Fangraphs WAR season. Just absolutely ridiculous. That would be among the best pitchers in baseball, even with that innings rate. That's how good he is. He doesn't need to pitch 180, 200 innings. You need to keep him healthy for the end of the season because the Rangers are hoping to make the playoffs. And, as fun and as great as this signing is, and as much as I love it, and I think he's the best pitcher in Rangers offseason signing history, I don't think it means that the Rangers are done. Coming up, we're going to look a little bit more at the money, why you shouldn't care about it, and a little bit why I am not concerned about those injuries and the Rangers making some other moves to completely rehaul this pitching staff. This is just move number 1. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We have got it all at BetOnline. If you are listening to this, you're probably listening to it after the U.S. men's national team has either won or lost against the Netherlands. If you're feeling spicy and you want to bet on whichever one of those teams to go and win it all, you can do that at betonline.net. You can make some bets on the Rangers. I'm sure their odds are definitely changing for if they make the playoffs next year, because I am very much banking on them to end that drought. Depending on what else they do this offseason, there's going to be a little bit more, but they haven't made the playoffs since 2016. And this is a pretty decent place to place your bets on those Texas Rangers playoff odds. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, about the money. Again, the Rangers have spent a lot of money the last couple seasons, and there are a lot of fans of different teams that like clowning on the Rangers and other teams who, spend big money or who make big moves. The Rangers specifically, the San Diego Padres as well. People like clowning on them for, oh, look at you, you traded all those prospects for one, so you paid all this money to all these players. Oh, wow, you spent all this money to finish behind the Dodgers and the Astros and whatever. Yeah, I didn't spend that money. I'm not a billionaire. I do not own the Texas Rangers. If I did, I would not be up at 1:29 a.m. on a Friday night recording a podcast. I would be sitting in my luxury chair, laughing, scoffing to myself, drinking my fancy $18 million bottle of whiskey, saying, oh, look at me. I just spent $180 million on the best starting pitcher in baseball. Because the Rangers have found the market inefficiency. So have the Padres, and so have a few other teams. It's this thing called, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. It's called trying. Trying? Yes, trying. It's a very new concept of, you spend money on good players in free agency. When teams decide to play poor. And there are a lot of franchises that are doing this. There are the small market teams who legitimately cannot afford these, well, excuse me, are less able to afford, I should say, or more willing to convince their fan bases that these billionaire owners are actually very poor. But the fans are more willing to accept that, okay, well, certain guys are going to be out of our price range. Well, really, if you look at the net worth of some of these major league owners, none of these guys are out of their price range. There is no cap. There is no salary cap in Major League Baseball, which is one of the greatest tricks that owners ever played on themselves and on fans. It's, oh, well, they can spend as much as they want. Now, with this luxury tax, it's basically a cap. None of these guys are really going to go over it, especially not into the theoretical Cohen zone, which, by the way, the richest owner in all of Major League Baseball, New York Mets, who's also a Mets fan, just let this guy walk after winning 2 Cy Youngs, after being a part of some of the greatest Mets teams in history. He just let him walk because I don't know. I don't really know if he's worth it. The last contract offer I saw was the Mets offering him 3 years, $120 million, and from what I saw, I believe Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News reported that the Mets did not get a final counteroffer. He just went ahead and signed that deal with the Rangers. But let's look at the money. This breakdown comes to us from Levi Weaver of The Athletic. From his sources, confirm that in 2023, it will be worth $30 million in 2024 and 25. He will make $40 million each of those seasons. 2026, he will make $38 million, and in 2027, he will make $37 million. There is a non-guaranteed final year of that contract. I think it's a mutual option. There are some kickers that I believe are in there. I haven't found out what those kickers or conditions are that would make that 2028 year vest, which doesn't even sound like a real year. But it's not about the money. It does not matter. Even if it was about the money, it's about, okay, well, how much can the Rangers owners justify spending? Well, they are justifying spending a whole heck of a lot of money. And I have been saying for most of this offseason that if the Rangers sign deGrom, then they are 100% out on Carlos Rodon. Well, after seeing this deal, I'm not so sure. I know it should make me more sure if the Rangers are paying $180 million to this guy that there's no way they get Rodon too. Well, I thought there's no way the Rangers would get one of those top 4 shortstops last year, and by golly, they got 2 of them and put them right square up the middle. So yeah, I think it's possible. I'm not going to say it's likely, but it is possible. I think Kodai Senga, the Japanese pitcher, I think that's a more likely if the Rangers are going to go the free agent route for their second starting pitcher, as opposed to going through the trade route, which I think is more likely for them to go get whatever number 2 starters slot in behind deGrom and ahead of Martin Perez, who I think they envision as their number 3, and John Gray as a number 4, and then Odorizzi and Dane Dunning as number 5. That's what the rotation looks like at the moment. But it is not your money, and all these teams who are crying poor, and I don't know if I want to do this, I don't know if I want to do this, you go spend that money every single time, even if you only get 2 years out of him. Say you get 2 fully, if I were to tell you this, if you were going to get 2 fully healthy Jacob deGrom seasons, like 28 starts a year, and he is healthy in the playoffs, and then after that 3rd season, he doesn't pitch more than 50 innings in any of the final 3 seasons. Would you take that? Because I would take that. I would take that in a heartbeat. I would take that in a nanosecond, because 2 fully healthy deGrom seasons are, well, honestly, they're probably worth $60 million a year. They are just that valuable. He has been that insanely good that he is worth that insane amount of money. And you look at the back end of the deal and you think, okay, well, you can live with that. I mean, the back end of most of these massive major league contracts ends up looking bad. You know that. Rangers know that. The front office, all these front offices who signed these guys to these big old deals, even the Corey Seager, the Marcus Semien deal, towards the back end, for any deal more than 5 years, it's going to look bad at the end. But you are paying, those years are a premium for what you're getting up front. That is what it's all about. It is not about what they're doing at his age 38, 39, 40 seasons. Maybe he's healthy. Maybe he becomes like Justin Verlander and just pitches forever and defies the laws of physics and father time like Adrian Beltre did. Maybe. That'd be kind of cool. I don't necessarily expect it. I don't expect that he is going to throw 180 innings next year, but he's been incredibly good and he's been getting better and better as he goes on. But the Rangers are also getting better and better as they go on. We're going to look at some other moves, who makes the most sense, and what this means for possibly what the Rangers are going to do in terms of how they spend on a bat. But first, this word from our sponsors. Now, one of the most interesting notes that I saw in reading a whole lot of coverage about Jacob deGrom, reading a lot of nice glowing praises, was from The Athletic, specifically from Eno Saris. He showed a plot point. If you're not subscribed to The Athletic, got some really, really great stuff there. And he showed a plot points of the velocity for four-seamers for Jacob deGrom. And in 2014, when he first came up, he was averaging around 94-ish miles an hour. Then it started to climb up just a little bit. 2015, dropped back down. In 2017, back to the lowest point at 94. The years before it was a 96. Then throughout from 2018 on, just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing to where he's averaging nearly 100 miles an hour on his fastball as he's getting older. That does not happen to any pitcher, let alone guys with this kind of a workload. Like, it just does not get faster and faster and faster, and the spin rate's getting nastier as well, and he can still pinpoint command it, which is just absolutely absurd when you're throwing that thing 100 miles an hour and it's spinning all over the place. You know exactly where you want to throw it. That is one of the more impressive things. But I think one of the ways that he could preserve his arm a little bit more is not throwing max effort 100% of the time. He did have some injuries that are a little bit frightening, but not the most terrifying things in the world. He had elbow inflammation in 2019, which knocked him out of the rest of that season. Down the stretch, there were some conflicting reports of him saying, "I'm fine to come back. I am ready to start again." But the Mets said, "Oh no, he's got too much inflammation. We're going to shut him down," which made sense because the Mets were pretty much out of it last year, and having him come back and get re-injured and having to miss more of, this season was not ideal. They knew they were going to be more contending this year than they were last year, and they kind of just, couched him towards the end of the season. Even if he could come back, I think it might have been maybe 1 to 3 starts at the most. So he still did end up missing a decent portion of that year. But he headed into camp. He was healthy this year. He thought, okay, everything's going to be great. We have Max Scherzer. We have Jacob deGrom. We have other players that are also good. So it's the year of the Mets, baby, coming up Mets. Despite all of that, ramp up. And I think part of that escalated quick ramp up. Remember, there was a lockout last year. Thank God there's not going to be one of those this year. But I think that escalated ramp up of going from 0 to 100, I think that really kind of played a part in his injury this year. He got injured in spring training, did not make his debut for 4 months. He had where did we go? A stress reaction in his right scapula, which is his shoulder muscle. The shoulders are always a little bit tricky, a little bit worrisome having those injuries of the two, of all of his injuries really. He also missed some time that year in 2016 it was when he missed some time. It was due to a bicep injury. This was due to a shoulder injury. A little more concerning, it was 2016 when he did miss some time with a bicep injury, but the shoulder injury is a little concerning, but I think that he can recover from it well, and he passed his physical. The Rangers have some of the best medical team in all of baseball. Dr. Keith Meister is you might have heard that name before. If you haven't, you have, because if you have paid any attention to baseball the last, decade, 15 years, he has been one of the premier surgeons, honestly, in all of sports. He's a guy who does a lot of these major Tommy John surgeries. I'm pretty sure that he did Bryce Harper's Tommy John surgery that just happened a couple weeks ago. But he is one of the best names in the business. The Rangers have a top tier medical team. They weren't able to keep Mitch Garver healthy this season, but again, I think that's more of a Mitch Garver thing than a Texas Rangers thing. But the person who they did keep healthy was their main star, their main investment, Corey Seager, who has missed a lot of times, had a lot of different years where he had random things go wrong and he'd missed 30 odd games or whatever. Hadn't played 150 games like he did this year since I believe his rookie year. He had 151 games under his belt this year. Did have some random little injuries that caught him missed a couple games here, a couple games there. But for the most part, they kept him healthy. And if they can keep Corey Seager healthy, then I think they can keep Jacob deGrom healthy. It'll be an interesting task with a new pitching coach in Mike Maddox to kind of game plan around, see, all right, how much stress can this guy's shoulder and elbow and entire body handle before he starts breaking down? How often do we want to skip starts? And I think that's when you start to have to look at the depth of this rotation. At this point, it is Jacob deGrom, Martin Perez, John Gray, Jake Odorizzi, and Dane Dunning, which I'm not sure how quickly Dane Dunning is going to be ready for the start of the season. Him, or if he's not there, then I think it's Glenn Otto. But you start looking at that and you want a little bit more depth, or at least I do. And I think that's where the Rangers need to get at least one more starting pitcher. And one of the concerns that I had about deGrom is that you're going to pace him if he's not healthy, if he's giving you around 100 innings. I think that's kind of the barometer for next year. After that, I'm hoping that he gets a little bit more healthy because I am concerned about the ramifications of that shoulder injury. I think having a year of having him here, maybe you feel a little bit better about those concerns, but you want a lot of depth. We saw what happened with the Rangers starting pitching at the beginning of this year. They went in, and last year, after they signed Martin Perez, I thought, okay, that's fine. Ended up looking dumb just saying it was fine because he had a fantastic year, but I still thought Rangers probably needed one more starting pitcher because there were a lot of names that they were kind of trying out where maybe this guy will be here, and it was basically from John Gray on. It was Martin Perez and John Gray. Really, it was John Gray and Martin Perez, and they kind of flip-flopped themselves with how they performed during the year. But once you got to starter number 3, it was like, all right, let's see how it goes. Let's see how Taylor Hearn was kind of thought of as the number 3 starter, and he didn't quite work out as a starter. Had a pretty good run as a multi-inning reliever, some really nasty stuff. Spencer Howard thought, okay, this guy's a starter. This guy is a former top prospect. He is going to pan out. He did not pan out, and I think it's about time for him to be in the bullpen. But they might still try and have him as a starter. They also had Garrett Richards, who was like, I don't know, kind of a thing there for a while. It got so desperate towards the end of the year, they had to bring in Dallas Keuchel, and he was just absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. And the Rangers bullpen kind of held up as well as they could. Got some decent starts from Cole Reagans down the stretch. Nice to see him make his major league debut. Not sure that he's ready to start the season on the major league roster for a team that is very clearly actually putting their money where their mouth is, literally, and going for a playoff spot from the start of the season. But you need that depth. If the Rangers didn't have that, then, they didn't have that. And that's why they ended up losing 90-plus games this past year, 94 games to be specific. That was one of the many reasons. But still, you need a lot of depth, especially if you have some guys who can't be 100% counted on to give you 150-plus innings. I think John Gray kind of showed when he missed 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it is down the stretch. He was healthy for a decent chunk in the middle of the season, but once August hit, that's when things started getting really rough once he was out for 6 weeks. I mean, outside of starts from Martin Perez and John Gray, the Rangers just did not have it. But when those two guys were starting, the Rangers were a pretty decent team. They were a little bit above 500. And, you add more guys like Jacob deGrom, guys that are just better than John Gray or Martin Perez, then that's when you start to look at a winning team. I mean, the offense is not that far away. You have your top 3 in your lineup, and it is probably one of the better top 3s in all of baseball. I don't think it's the best, but I definitely think it's at least in the top 10, if not in the top 5, with Nathaniel Lowe, Marcus Semien, and Corey Seager. Then you start adding in guys like Adolis Garcia, Mitch Garver, and, let's see what kind of version we get of Jonah Heim and how much Josh Young progresses from what he did in that short little 26 game stint at the big league level. I think it'll be a little bit better, but still, the Rangers have the makings of a solid team. Again, with all those one-run losses, I think they're a lot closer to contention than most people from the outside looking in initially thought. But the Rangers do need one more starting pitcher. I've talked a little bit this offseason about maybe making a trade with the Brewers. The Brewers have shown they are willing to make some trades. They just traded away Colton Wong. It looked more like a retooling kind of a move, so maybe trading for their ace is not something that's necessarily doable. I still think you got to, take a shot if you can try and get a Corbin Burnes. If you have the top two of your rotation as Corbin Burnes and Jacob deGrom, like that's the best 1-2 punch in all of baseball, and I don't think it's necessarily all that close. Well, depending on if the Mets sign Verlander or something crazy like that. But still, I think that is the makings of a team that if they traded for a guy like Burnes or got some other, top of the rotation pitcher, and Martin Perez is your number 3, and if Martin Perez, continues to sprinkle that magic dust that made him so darn good last year, or continues to pitch at major leaguers and know that he has major league stuff to get those guys out, and has a similar, maybe not the same level of success, but a similar level of success, then that's when you start to think, okay, maybe this rotation is good enough to go for one of those top wild card spots, or maybe even start thinking about challenging with the Astros. I mean, I don't think they're going to, because the Astros are unfortunately a really darn good team, and they just got better signing Jose Abreu, but that's when you can start to think about finishing second in the AL West as opposed to finishing third and grabbing one of those wild card spots, maybe not grabbed by the Seattle Mariners, who, by the way, have a really, really good team and are really young. And that is one of the points that I also want to make about this team and having to spend money. One of the ways that you can, get around being a good team without spending money is by drafting and developing players really, really well. That's why all these teams like Houston, like Cleveland, like Tampa Bay, that's why those teams can, finish and win their divisions and have 95 win seasons while spending little on payroll. Houston spends a little bit more than those teams, but that's how those teams do it. The Rangers have not done that well, so you don't have that luxury of all these really, really great young guys on, major league minimums or making $1 million, maybe $2 million. You have to go and spend big money if you want to contend. The Rangers have not really been willing to do that in the post-Adrian Beltre era, which is kind of why they have been saddled towards the bottom end of the standings. They made a couple of really shrewd moves. They did a really good job of developing these kind of older pitchers like Lance Lynn, like Mike Minor, into having some successful seasons. And 2019, if not for the injuries to, most of the team's key players, then I think that team might have slipped into one of those wildcard spots, but we'll never know. And they didn't even finish above 500 that year and have not done so since 2016. But signing Jacob deGrom, despite all of the worries and concerns and the gambles, this is the gamble you take when you have been in this long of a playoff drought. It is a real clear sign from everybody with the team, from ownership down to the smallest intern, physically or just, stature wise in the organization, that every single one of them is way more sick of losing than you or I are. I have had this podcast since 2019. I have not covered a winning baseball team. I have covered a bad team, a horrible team, and a bad team that was better than they looked but were still bad. I am ready for a 500 team to create a daily podcast about. I am ready to do a post-game playoff podcast. I am ready to talk about winning baseball, and not just for one freaking month in since 2019. It's the first winning month that the Rangers have had since 2019. They had one of them this year, only one of them. And then everything went downhill after that. I am so ready for a winning team. I know Rangers fans are ready for a winning team. And to get some of those 2010 casuals back on board. This is a fun team. This is a team willing to spend big when others are not. And again, don't worry about the money, because it is not your money. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today. It is the biggest stories of the day, plus big game recaps and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy Jacob freaking deGrom.